Well, thank you very much, Susan. And that's I felt like walking out in the middle of that introduction. That was beautiful. Thank you. And I've always said this is one of my favorite fundraising events because I know so many people. But because I know so many people, that's making me very nervous today. But I'm glad to be here. I wanted to just start with a long story made short about Connie Isaacson, because when I first met her, well, first of all, before I met her, a handful of us, Carl Voss included, Jann Hill, there were about a handful of us trying to get a skate park down by the river. And we were part of AMOS, which stands for a Mid-Iowa Organizing Strategy. And we'd been trying to get this skate park downtown for about 15 years. I would describe it to people that I was young when we started and middle-aged when we were getting going, okay? And if you remember the movie several years ago, it was nominated for an Oscar, but it was called Boyhood, where they followed the same actors, actresses for 12 years, made this movie. That's what this skate park felt like. And it wasn't until we got a grant from the Community Foundation that we could get Connie Isaacson involved, and the rest is history. Connie got involved. She got the right people around the table, which we struggled with. And when we got the right people, it became a reality. And Connie used to say that if your city doesn't have a skate park, it becomes one. And so I was a soccer mom. I didn't have any kids that skateboarded, but I was part of this team, and now it's nationally recognized, and it's really a great contribution. And that's how I first initially got to know Connie. So today I'm going to talk about what if the rest of your life is the best of your life. And I want to start off by saying that I've been a student of the second half of life since my professional mentor, Dr. Elmer Burak. He was at the University of Illinois, Chicago. He died 12 years ago at 82. But he sent me this book, and he said, Jann, read this. Baby boomers are not going to know what to do with the rest of their life. And when I read this, I got it in about 2003. And when I read this, I just wanted to underline every sentence. It really captivated me. And this is the foundational book for the organization that I'm involved in, which is called SAGEing International. And it's SAGE-ING. And I've written about saging so much that my computer always comes back and says, you spell check, you mean sagging. And I'm like, no. There's some of that probably, but no, it's SAGE-ING. And I'm really intrigued with this topic. It's my focus, I love it. I really call it kind of the non-financial aspect of retirement planning, because we talk about money, but really it's everything else people are concerned with if they have the money figured out. So I'm passionate about the second half of life. Well, when is the second half of life? Well, if the average life expectancy for women is 80 and 76 for men, then the second half of life starts about 40. And when I share that in workshops, people are like, whoa, that's sooner than I think. I mean, and it is, it really is. So I want to share some facts about that I received from the Mind and Spirit Counseling Center. The divorce rate for people 50 plus is higher than average. Young adults 18 to 25 are much more likely than people 50 plus to experience depression, though the rates are rising. And we just heard Connie mention this. The suicide rate for people 50 plus is higher than average, particularly for white males, but it's also, I think you said the second, isn't the second leading cause of death for young people? Alcohol abuse is being called a silent epidemic. Each year, 1 in 5 women in the United States has a mental health problem such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, or an eating disorder. Studies show that people who feel well-connected and supported have lower rates of anxiety and depression than those who do not have social connections, and those who do not have social connections are at a higher rate for suicide low self-esteem, and antisocial behaviors. So how do we make the rest of life the best of life? Well, please know that I don't have any answers. And what I'm going to share with I don't. But what I'm going to share with you is not easy to do. So it's not easy, and I don't have answers. But in less than 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you what I've learned during the past 20 years. And I've organized my remarks around 5 areas. Embracing aging. We live in a youth-centric culture. Younger is often promoted as better. Most advertisements are about anti-aging, not embracing aging. Now, I will admit, I too use some anti-aging cream. But I do that because I also use lotion on my leather purses. So if it works on my leather purses, I'm thinking, you know, the lotion on my face might help too. But when we're talking about anti-aging, that really is external work. And when we're talking about saging, we're talking about internal work. Society causes many of us to have FOGO. Now, we've heard of FOMO, but FOGO is fear of getting older. The statistics on young adults that I just shared and Connie shared do not make youth sound like the perfect age. And it's time to push back. Now, it is happening, and some people out there, celebrities, are really trying hard, Jane Fonda being one of them. You know, I loved Grace and Frankie. And the last season was really a lot about saging, because they kind of deal with some of the things I'm going to talk about today. Jane Fonda also was on a cover of a magazine recently that says, life gets better with age. And now she's in a new movie, I think Book Club, 80 with Brady, or 84 Brady, or I haven't seen it yet. I wanted to. I wrote about it, but I haven't seen it yet. And Martha Stewart at 81 is on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. Now, I have to tell you, I don't think at any age would I have qualified to be on the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. And I was even a lifeguard. I wore swimsuits a lot, but I don't think I could be on the cover, okay? But in saging talk, we don't ask how old someone is. We ask, how many years of life experience do you have? And the question I ask is, would you trade your life experience to be younger again? Now, there are certain aspects, like I used to be able to do the splits and, things like that. I was a cheerleader. But, would you really trade your life experience? Now, in 1985, and this is before many of you were probably born, there was an award-winning movie, Oscar-winning movie, in which it was called Cocoon. And the residents of a Florida retirement home, they stumble across an alien fountain of youth. They discover that if they swim in this swimming pool, they're young, they're energetic. It really takes them back. And the aliens, I'm really making this, I'm trying to condense it because many of you probably haven't seen it, but the aliens offer to take these residents with them on the spaceship. And if they get on the spaceship, they're told they will never die, they'll never get sick, and they'll never grow old. Now, at the time this came out in 1985, some friends and I, we were talking about this, because honestly, it was a very popular movie, and we were talking about, would you get on the spaceship to leave everyone and everything you love behind? And most of us said, no. We want to have life experience. Unlock purpose. Another aspect that I think is important. And Jim kind of mentioned purpose. Regardless of your age, what's your reason for getting up in the morning? We all need to have a reason. And people who seek meaning beyond themselves are healthier, happier, and live longer. Research says 7 years longer. Now, purpose, we often think with a big P, like it's got to be really monumental, something really important. I've got to be Mother Teresa. I've got to be Martin Luther King Jr. or, other notary people that we know of. But really, purpose with a little p. Think about how you want to help or contribute. Jim talked about service. Think about who you want to help. Think about what energizes you and what drains you. We unlock purpose by exploring, by experimenting. Some people say, well, I'll discover it. Well, discovery, but you have to do something to discover it. And so that's where the exploring, experimenting, trying new things. And I often say, think about your passions. We heard Connie talk about passion, your gifts, and your values. Last year, there was a popular movie called A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks. And Otto, he's not just a man who's lost his wife, but he's a man who's lost his purpose. He's bitter, he's angry, difficult. I loved the neighbor. If you saw the movie, I loved the Latina neighbor who was always trying to warm him up, and she eventually got there. Years ago, there was a movie called About Schmidt, where Warren Schmidt, played by Jack Nicholson, he's lost his way. His wife dies too. He's retired. He doesn't know what to do with his life. He buys an RV, travels around the country. But again, when we lose our purpose, and so much of our purpose is often tied to our identity, which is often tied to what we do. So if we are what we do, and we don't do it anymore, then who are we? So we need a reason for getting up in the morning. Face mortality. Thinking about death can impact how you live your life. The Benedictines teach us, keep death daily before your eyes. At any moment, we might breathe our last breath, and it can come at any time. Closeness to death makes life better. A few years ago, I did a TEDx talk called Embracing Death, Seeing Life Through a Different Lens, where I explain how I've integrated these concepts into my leadership courses, leadership workshops, and I talk about death a lot. I tend to plan my funeral the way others plan weddings or parties. I like to revise it. I get new ideas. I go to funeral, I collect eulogies, I collect obituaries. I mean, I love it. I often say another movie that I refer to is Harold and Maude. I mean, I'm very much like Maude. Harold and Maude was an old movie, kind of a cult movie now, where a young suicidal man meets this older, he's suicidal and she's passionate about life, and they meet at a funeral because they like to go to funerals. And so I'm a lot like Maude. But I'm also a hospice volunteer, and I've done a lot of grief work. And COVID made death front and center. Not only did we lose people, but we lost companies, industries, jobs. Grief and death most of us are experiencing a lot of deep grief and death. And all of these changes involve relationships. I recently learned about a new app. We're all into apps now. And this app is called We Croak. And if you go to the app, if you go to the website, okay, the tagline is, we find happiness by contemplating our mortality. And it's inspired by a Bhutanese folk saying, to be a happy person, one must contemplate death 5 times daily. Every day, the app sends you 5 invitations to stop and think about death. Now, think about how you want to be eulogized at your funeral. In other words, think about how you want to be remembered. Then make sure you're living in that way, and the earlier we figure this out, the better, which is why I love to introduce these concepts to like 22-year-olds. And they love it once they kind of understand where I'm coming from, and if I connect the dots. Value relationships. Susan, I think, will like this. In 1966, the Beatles asked us 2 questions that continue to haunt us. Look at all the lonely people. Where do they all come from? Look at all the lonely people. Where do they all belong? Loneliness was an epidemic before the pandemic, and it's even worse now. When we're younger, it's easier to form friendships through many organic situations. Most friendships tend to be front-end loaded through experiences on our life journey. Daycare, school, sports, college, work, community, faith-based activities, all of these settings are conducive to creating friendships, but they're most common in the earliest phases of our life. I mean, even soccer, you know, John and I were soccer parents for so long, and we thought we'd stay in touch with these soccer parents forever, but it just didn't happen. Research indicates that our circle of friends is shrinking. Even though we have Facebook, all the social media, people are still lonely, and our circle of friends is shrinking. For people of all ages, people quit work, they retire, they move away, they die. Some friendships don't last, or others become unhealthy. In Robert Waldinger's TED Talk, What Makes a Good Life, Lessons from the Longest Study on Happiness, and he has a recent book out called The Good Life, Waldinger says that while many young people tend to think that fame, fortune, and hard work will bring them happiness, it's actually our social connections that are most important for our health and well-being. The National Academy of Sciences reported that more than 1/3 of adults aged 45 and older feel lonely. Dr. Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, author of Together, the Healing Power of Human Connections in a Sometimes Lonely World, said recently in a New York Times essay, when people are socially disconnected, their risk of anxiety and depression increases. So does their risk of heart disease, dementia, and stroke. The increased risk of premature death associated with social disconnection is comparable to smoking daily and may be even greater than the risk associated with obesity. We are facing a friendship recession. This is a term being used to describe the rise in the number of people who lack close friends, who have fewer people to turn to in times of crisis. While we don't need lots of friends, we need to have a support group of people we trust. Who would you call in the middle of the night with an emergency? Remember that illness starts with I, and wellness starts with we. We need to continue to make connections because, as my friend Michelle Whitty says, connection is protection. Think legacy. Psychoanalyst Erik Erikson wrote that in the middle years of adult life, which we know now is like 40, we come to realize I am what survives me. Actually, Rabbi Harold Kushner, who just passed away, wrote the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People, but he also wrote a book called When All I Ever Have Isn't Enough. And in that book, he talks about there's a point in time when instead of thinking about how much further, how much higher can I climb, we start looking back. And that's what we're talking about with I am what survived me. What can I leave behind? Or what can I do now to make future generations better? Legacy is not just for the rich and famous, but for all of us. It's not just at the end of life, because we don't know when the end is. It's for now. Leaving it, and we're leaving our legacy in what I call bite-sized pieces. We're leaving it all the time in breadcrumbs, leaving a trail along the way. That can be negative. It's not guaranteed to be positive unless we're intentional and we think about it. Our breadcrumb legacy can be our true star, our North Star, our guiding light. And legacy, I had someone at a workshop recently say to me, well, don't you think it's self-centered to be thinking about your legacy all the time? And I said, well, substitute the word impact. What kind of impact do you want to have on others? Because you could be having a negative impact if you're not thinking about it. So research indicates that people at the end of life want to know that their life mattered, that mattering matters. What you've learned, your wisdom, is as valuable as what you've earned. So find a way to pass it on. In closing, how do we make the rest of life the best of life? We embrace aging. We unlock purpose. We face mortality. We value relationships. We think legacy. And we look for role models. Who's living a life that looks attractive to you and why? Keep going, keep growing. Stay relevant, stay engaged. And I'll end with a story I read about Gandhi when he was traveling in England. A reporter from India approached him and said, Mahatma, I'm writing an article about you for the people in India. What is your message I can share with them? Gandhi was about to board a train and quickly wrote on a piece of paper then and handed it to the reporter, just as the train took off. The reporter opened the piece of paper and it said, "My life is my message." So be the example for others to see. May you live your life in the way you want to be remembered, so that the rest of your life is the best of your life. Thank you.